This video was brought to you by my loyal patrons. Pledge today and receive exclusive perks. Link in the description.
Thomas is a tank engine who lived at the big station on the island of Sodor. He had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler and a short stumpy dome. Thomas came to Sodor a long time ago to help build the railway. There weren't many engines on Sodor then, but he did have one friend.
Morning, Edward.
Well, hello, Thomas. What's got you in such a good mood today?
Today's the day, Edward. I just know it. Today, the Fat Controller will ask me to pull a train of my very own. I just shunted some trucks going to Wellsworth with no engine assigned to it. I'm sure he'll ask me.
Well, I hate to burst your bubble, Thomas, but I'm taking those trucks to Wellsworth. The Fat Controller just assigned me.
Oh.
Oh, don't look so sad. Patience, my young friend. Your time will come.
Do you really think so, Edward?
I know so. I promise you that.
Thomas and Edward couldn't do all the work by themselves, and eventually other bigger engines arrived. They were much stronger than the two of them, and they were rather full of themselves.
We are Modern Image. The Fat Controller brought us on to do the work that you simply can't do anymore. Your days are numbered, little Edward. I'm afraid to say...
Oh, shut up, would you? No one asked. Sometimes I think you just like hearing your big fat mouth talk.
I say.
Thomas was a cheeky little engine, and he thought no engine worked as hard as he did. So whenever he had the chance to tease the big engines, he took it.
What the?
Wake up, lazy bones. Why don't you work hard like me?
Oh, Thomas, I swear, one of these days I'll put you in your place.
I would love to see you try. Stop! Stop, Gordon! Stop, please! My poor wheels!
How's this for hard work, little Thomas?
Thomas soon realised he wasn't as clever as he thought. More than anything, he wanted to pull a train of his very own.
One day, I'll leave this yard and pull trains just like you all.
You pull trains? I've only ever seen them pull you.
Oh, that's a good one.
I'll show them. I'll show them.
So whenever a chance came, Thomas jumped at the opportunity. He did finally get to pull a passenger train.
Off we go.
What? Wait, Thomas, wait!
But he left the coaches behind. So next, he tried to pull trucks.
Ah! Stop pushing! Stop pushing!
Which also didn't go very well. But Thomas didn't stop trying, and one fateful day, he finally proved his worth.
Come on, James. Let's get you home.
Oh, thank you, Thomas.
And the Fat Controller rewarded Thomas for his efforts.
What the?
Hello, Gordon. Surprised to see me?
What? What are you doing here?
Running my new branch line, of course. The Fat Controller gave it to me. This is what happens when engines actually work hard. But you wouldn't know, would you?
Oh, shut up. I've had enough. To think the Fat Controller would give you your own line. Whatever is this railway coming to? And now he's going to shunt our coaches.
Well, he's rather rude. A bit dramatic, too.
You'll get used to that. Come along now. We're rather late.
We're right behind you, Thomas. We're coming along. We're coming along.
Now Thomas runs his own branch line with his 2 faithful coaches, Annie and Clarabelle. Thomas has run his line for many years now, but even so, he still has much to learn.
Today we celebrate the big 80th anniversary. 80 years since the very first book of the Railway series was published in 1945. And in honor of this momentous milestone, I figured this would be the perfect opportunity to finally cover the series' most famous character. This has been a long time coming, and we're finally here. Ladies and gentlemen, I present an engine who needs no introduction. Here is the complete history of Thomas the Tank Engine.
Dear Christopher, here is your friend Thomas the Tank Engine. He wanted to come out of his station yard and see the world. These stories tell you how he did it. I hope you will like them, because you helped me to make them. Your loving Daddy.
You've likely heard this foreword hundreds of times. It was used as a bumper before the show's intro for many years. But what does it mean? Who is Christopher, and how is Thomas his friend? Let's go back to the very, very beginning. Thomas the Tank Engine's origins date back to a wooden toy train that Reverend Wilbert Awdry crafted in 1942 for his son Christopher, who at the time was only 2 years old. The design of the engine was totally freelance, with long side tanks that reached the front of his smokebox. The tanks were slanted, which gave it the vague appearance of a J50 class tank engine, or some type of industrial. Wilbert gave it a 1 because, as he states in the Thomas the Tank Engine Man, I was an inexperienced painter, and 1 was the easiest number. I certainly couldn't have managed a 2. The NW at this point simply stood for nowhere, as this was a make-believe engine that did not belong to any known railway. Christopher loved the engine, and christened it with the name Thomas. After the success of the first Railway series book, The 3 Railway Engines, in 1945, Wilbert was encouraged to write another one. As the characters of that book were all based on ones that he had made up in his own tales to Christopher, the topic of the next book was obvious to him. It would be focused on Christopher's Thomas. Thomas the Tank Engine. As stated in the Thomas the Tank Engine Man, unlike Edward, Gordon, and Henry, Thomas was inspired by a real engine, or rather, a real toy engine. Wilbert's original sketches of Thomas reflected the toy, long, slanted side tanks and all. He provided these sketches to Reginald Payne, the new illustrator for the series. However, Payne took some creative liberties with Thomas's design. Payne was a Southern man, and decided to base Thomas's look on a Southern engine. The engine he chose was the E2 class tank engine of the London, Brighton, and South Coast Railway. Initially, Wilbert was understandably annoyed with this change, but after finding out that Payne had used a real-life locomotive for reference, he was content with it and allowed it. Thomas's iconic design that we know today, with his token extended side tanks and distinct dipped front running board, are all characteristics of the E2 class, and can all be attributed to Reginald Payne. The story of Thomas the Tank Engine is one that we all know well. Thomas was a station pilot at the big station who yearned for more in life. He grew bored being stuck in the yard, and through several misadventures attempted to leave it. He tried to pull coaches and pull trucks, neither of which went well. But eventually he proved himself when he saved another engine, James, after he crashed. As a reward for his hard work, the Fat Controller gave Thomas a branch line. Much is established in this book, including Thomas's ongoing rivalry with Gordon and his friendship with Edward. I think Thomas the Tank Engine has a perfect structure and uses its 4-story format exquisitely. The first story, Thomas and Gordon, is all about just establishing who Thomas is. We learn what he's all about. He's cheeky, he's kinda rude, and he thinks he can get away with his bad behavior. We're essentially introduced to Thomas at his worst, and so we laugh at him when he gets his bunker handed to him by Gordon. The audience knows exactly what Thomas is all about by the story's end. The second story, Thomas's Train, right away clearly establishes Thomas's main goal.
Thomas often grumbled because he was not allowed to pull passenger trains. The other engines laughed. "Rubbish," said Thomas crossly. "You just wait, I'll show you."
He wants to leave the yard and pull trains like the others. He gets his first chance to when Henry is ill, and he fails as a result of his own impatience. We, the audience, laugh at Thomas's misfortune here, as he's still pretty inexperienced at this point.
But for a long time afterwards, the other engines laughed at Thomas and said, "Oh, look, there's Thomas, who wanted to pull a train, but forgot about the coaches."
But the magic occurs in Thomas's persistence. The third story, Thomas and the Trucks, sees him try a second time, this time pulling trucks for Edward. And he fails again, but this time much worse, and he gets reprimanded by the Fat Controller. Thomas has hit his lowest point of the book, and we, the audience, now feel some sympathy for him. We get that he's not screwing around anymore. He really wants this, and we want to see him succeed. And all of that comes to a beautiful close in the fourth and final story, Thomas and the Breakdown Train. The story starts showing Thomas has grown a bit since the last, getting in good graces with the Fat Controller. One day James races through and crashes. Third time's the charm, for Thomas fully proves himself when he rescues poor James in need. And as a reward for his heroism, the Fat Controller fully sees Thomas's potential and gives him his own branch line. Thomas the Tank Engine ends with Thomas in a much different place than where he started. He got what he wanted in the end, and he had grown as a character. A very happy, satisfying ending. The moral of this book is one I think all kids can take something away from. Never, ever give up on your goals. Keep trying, and you will achieve them. It won't always be easy. You'll make mistakes, and it may take some self-reflection and self-discipline to get there. But if you persist, you will succeed, and you'll gain life experience from it. Its message is timeless, and I think that's why this is the most popular book of the franchise, and why Thomas himself quickly became the most popular character of the series. It's clear to see why. Thomas is very relatable to the target audience. Thomas is a small tank engine, and here he is positioned in a world surrounded by big, pompous tender engines that don't take him seriously. I think kids can relate to that. They see themselves in Thomas. They may not see themselves in, like, Edward because, well, they're not old like him. They may not see themselves in Gordon because, well, no kid wants to be the bully. They understand who these characters are, but who they see themselves as is Thomas. Kids all want to do big things, leave boring routine, be noticed by the adults, get the big reward for doing good, and ultimately have a big adventure. It's fantasy fulfillment for them. Thomas continued to be popular, and by the fourth book already came a sequel to his, Tank Engine, Thomas Again. Here we see what life on Thomas's branch line is like, and how things have changed for him. His coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, are properly introduced here, a push-pull set that Thomas runs backwards and forwards with. While they are old, Thomas loves them dearly, and is rather protective of them.
Thomas sings them little songs, and Annie and Clarabelle sing too. When Thomas starts from a station, he sings, "Oh, come along, we're rather late. Oh, come along, we're rather late." And the coaches sing, "We're coming along, we're coming along."
But even though Thomas has grown up a bit, he's still the same flawed, cheeky tank engine. Getting a branch line gave him a sense of responsibility, which made him quite cocky.
Thomas the Tank Engine is very proud of his branch line. He thinks it is the most important part of the whole railway. "How can I run my line properly if Henry is always late? He doesn't realize that the Fat Controller depends on me."
He's still very impatient, as evident when he doesn't wait and leaves his guard behind. When he meets Terence the Tractor for the first time, the first words out of his mouth is an insult.
"I'm Thomas. I'm pulling a train. What ugly wheels you've got."
Damn, Thomas. Okay, calm down. Bertie the Bus gets introduced here, who proves an effective enabler to Thomas. He's the one that feeds into Thomas's competitive side.
"I've come to help you with your passengers today." "Help me?" said Thomas crossly, going bluer than ever and letting off steam. "I can go faster than you." "You can't." I can. I'll race you, said Bertie.
And the two have their famous race to the end of the line. Thomas and Bertie is a rather significant story in the Railway Series lore. Wilbert's children often asked Wilbert how it was possible that a race between a train and a bus was fair. Clearly the train had the advantage, and so Wilbert drew up a map of the route to show them that Thomas and Bertie each had an equal number of obstacles on their journey. The logistics of the race led to Wilbert figuring out the first ever map of Thomas's branch line, which, as we all know, evolved into him figuring out the entire geography and later history of the island of Sodor. The Railway Series' incredibly deep lore really got its start here, from a simple story where Thomas and a red bus race each other. When it came to figuring out the eventual lore, Wilbert was usually very big on not changing established canon in the stories as written. As Thomas was depicted as an E2 class in the original illustrations, that's what he stuck to. Thomas's official backstory became that he was an E2 class tank engine from Brighton, built for the London, Brighton, and South Coast Railway in 1915. As a result of a wartime mix-up, Thomas found his way north to Sodor, and ended up staying there on loan to help build the Northwestern Railway. Among the several other loaned engines there was Edward, and the two helped build the railway together, hence explaining Edward's sympathy towards Thomas in Thomas and the Trucks. The two had a pre-established friendship. After the railway opened for traffic, Thomas was kept as a station pilot at Vickerstown. Topham Hatt eventually expressed interest in purchasing the engines. The paperwork for Thomas went through first, and so Thomas technically became the first engine officially owned by the Northwestern Railway, hence his number 1. In 1925, the Farquhar Quarry was established on the west of Sodor, and the branch line from Knapford was extended to it. A larger engine was needed to run the new line. This coincided with Thomas rescuing James. As Thomas was available, Topham elected him to run the line. This is all very technical, and admittedly it does kinda diminish the significance of Thomas proving himself in that story. It makes it all kinda seem like it was a wild coincidence, and Topham was likely gonna have him run it anyway. Nonetheless, Thomas was promoted to work the branch line. Over the years, the line gained other engines, including Toby in 1951 and Percy in 1955. While Wilbert was very big on not changing established details, that did not mean he wouldn't write new stories to change the characters that were a point of contention for him. We saw this occur previously with Henry in The Flying Kipper, a story he wrote where Henry crashed specifically so he could be sent away to be rebuilt into something prototypical. The same kind of occurred with Thomas. Wilbert never liked how inconsistent Thomas's running board was between illustrations. The real E2s had dips at the front and back. Thomas lacked the rear dip, which, in Wilbert's eyes, meant his front and rear buffer beams were at different heights. So he wrote a story where Thomas crashed and had to be fully rebuilt to amend this issue. The story became Book 16's Thomas Comes to Breakfast, the notorious story where Thomas attempted to drive himself, only to not be able to stop, and crashed into a station master's house. It is so fascinating to me how a story that was birthed from the author simply wanting to change a detail became a story that embodied the character so well. Yes, Thomas does crash in this, just so his front could be changed, but it all occurs in a very Thomas way. He gets cocky from his driver's compliments.
You know just where to stop, laughed his driver. You could almost manage without me. Thomas had become conceited. He didn't realize his driver was joking. Driver says I don't need him now, he told the others.
Which makes him think he can drive himself. He tries to when no one's looking, and it all ends in calamity, ending with Thomas learning a lesson in humility. Wilbert was just a genius like that. I think this story's popularity is a real testament to his writing abilities. This was one of Chris Awdry's favorite stories.
This is certainly one of my favourite stories, and I believe it was one of Father's favourites too. It's called Thomas Comes to Breakfast.
And that is fascinating to me because this story was written in 1961. Chris would have been 21 or so then. This isn't one of the stories from his childhood that would have been more sentimental to him, and yet, it's one of his favorites. It quite possibly might be the most definitive Thomas story out there. This is all to say that Wilbert didn't change details just to change them. He worked those changes into the world naturally, and it kept things interesting. When Thomas returned from the works, he gained a new look, complete with a totally flat running board from front to rear, and this remains consistent in pretty much every book following. Following this, Thomas's next major appearance is in Book 18, Stepney the Bluebell Engine. In this, he becomes offended after being sidelined on his own branch line so the visiting engine Stepney can pass through. Though after being talked up so much by Stepney, he forgets to be angry.
"Ah, well," said Thomas modestly, "perhaps when you know the road as I do—" "Exactly," put in Stepney. "You're such an expert." Thomas, flattered, forgot he was cross and told Stepney all about his branch line.
It's not hard to convince Thomas of anything. Just feed into his ego a bit, and he'll agree to whatever. After this point, Thomas essentially stops being used. With the exception of a quick mention in mainline engines, Thomas does not appear in 7 consecutive books. I've always deduced that Wilbert kind of got bored with Thomas around this time, and turned his attention to other characters that had more going on with them. Characters that he had more to say about, like Gordon, Henry, Duck, and the Skarloey engines. And I think this sort of embodies the quintessential flaw with Thomas in the Railway series. Now this is just my opinion, of course, but unlike Gordon, or Henry, or Duck, Thomas doesn't really have a big character arc. He does in his first book, of course, but from the end of that book onwards, I've always felt that Thomas has stayed rather stagnant as a character. He never changed much or was given any sort of big status quo change. He's always been kept in his little bubble of Sodor, and that's really it. And maybe that's why Wilbert got bored of him. There's only so many stories that can be written that essentially use the same formula. Thomas gets boastful, or is rude to someone, or disobeys an order, and then gets his comeuppance. Now that's not to say that there aren't any nuances with the character though. One of my favorite status quo changes of the series, as minute as it is in the grand scheme of things, is between Thomas and Gordon in Book 8's Down the Mine. After Thomas falls into a mine after deliberately passing a danger sign, Gordon comes to his rescue. Both characters are in disgrace at this point in time, and they have a laugh about their situations. They agree to form an alliance.
"We're both in disgrace. Shall we form an alliance?" What was it? "An alliance, Thomas. United we stand, together we fall. You help me, and I'll help you. How about it?" "Right you are," said Thomas. "Good, that's settled." And buffer to buffer, the allies puffed home.
Gordon is the one who suggests it, and I think this admittedly says more about Gordon than it does Thomas, but still. From this point onwards, Thomas and Gordon never are rude to each other again. Both characters grew out of their infancy. There's the occasional teasing here and there, but it's always good-natured. The two undoubtedly have a mutual respect for each other.
As the tank engines moved wearily away, Gordon looked at Thomas and smiled. Then he took 3 deep breaths and winked. He didn't need to say anything. Thomas knew exactly what he meant.
The big rivalry introduced in Thomas's first story was followed up on and given a proper resolution. And they stuck to it. Thomas is brought out one final time in Wilbert's last book, Tramway Engines, in 1972. This was a push from the publishers and his own wife Margaret, who insisted Wilbert write one more book and put his most famous character in it. Wilbert was, as the Thomas the Tank Engine man states, a bit fed up with it all at this point. This is reflected in the book's foreword.
"Dear friends, Thomas has been pestering me to write about his branch line. After all, he said, we are the importantest part of the whole railway."
Thomas pestering Wilbert to write about his branch line, of course, is a slight at the publishers pestering Wilbert for more Thomas. And hilariously, Thomas only features in 2 stories here, both of which are focused on Percy. Thomas's final contribution to Wilbert's works was him laughing at poor Percy's appearance.
"Look what's crawled out of the hay! Talk about hairy caterpillars," puffed Thomas as he started away. "It's worth being late to have seen you!"
How very appropriately Thomas. Even after the series ended, Thomas continued to be the most popular character and the face of the franchise. The series was commonly known as the Thomas the Tank Engine books, rather than the Railway series, and the marketing played into that. Look at the cover of the 1979 annual. It's literally called the Thomas the Tank Engine Annual, and this was well before the TV series was a thing. It was pretty clear that even this early on, Thomas was the face of the Railway series, despite not being its main character. The TV series got greenlit in 1983, which was unsurprisingly titled Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. I'll of course talk more about Thomas specifically in the show in the next section, but I do want to touch on how the show's popularity affected the trajectory of the books. Chris Awdry took over as author that same year and continued the Railway series. The publishers, Kay and Ward, wanted more Thomas, and so Thomas appears in a lot of Chris's books. Of the 16 books that Chris wrote, 8 of them have Thomas in the book's title or have him on the cover, a couple of which Thomas barely appears in. Thomas's increased popularity from the TV show at the time meant Chris was kind of stuck using Thomas for a lot of his stories, and thus several other characters were sorely underused, like Duck, Oliver, Boko, Bear, and the Skarloey engines. Chris was allowed some creative freedom, of course, but he has expressed frustration about the demands for Thomas to appear so heavily and having to discard some of his own original book ideas in favor of Thomas-focused ones. That being said, I think there's a good number of interesting Thomas books in Chris's run. Book 30, More About Thomas the Tank Engine, a very creative title, was deliberately written in a rush to tie into the TV series, so the show would have more Thomas-centric stories to adapt in its second season. The book overall is a little, unimaginative. Chris himself even admits so in Sodor reading between the lines. But it does give us a little bit more to the best frenemies dynamic between Thomas and Percy. Until this point, I always looked at the two as work colleagues. Like, they're clearly friendly and they trust each other enough. Thomas has trusted Percy with Annie and Clarabelle on occasion in the past, after all. But I feel it's always been kind of out of courtesy. If you're forced to work with someone that you don't really like for several years, you will grow to like each other over time. Toby is the median between the two, but it's pretty clear that he and Percy are much closer, while Thomas is more off in his own world. The Thomas-Percy best frenemies dynamic is actually really funny to me, because both are so evenly matched in their own limited ways. Percy is naive, so he takes everything he's told as true, or is always asking questions.
I say, Toby, what's a drip? Do you know? I heard a boy on the platform call his friend one this afternoon.
Thomas knows better, but he's a hothead, so he never has the patience for his dumb inquiries.
The boy just thought his friend was being a coward, or silly, or a spoilsport.
But Percy outmatches Thomas in wits, and you can always clap back at him with the perfect comeback.
If you stopped me from doing something nice, would you be a drip, Thomas? You're the drip, answered Thomas crossly.
Two evenly matched nitwits arguing over nothing, while good old Toby sits on the sideline with his popcorn, watching in amusement. This book sees Thomas and Percy falling out over an incident with Cole in its first story, which isn't resolved by the story's end. Their friendship is finally mended in the last story, Drip Tank, after Percy rescues Thomas.
I'm sorry I was rude, said Thomas as Percy helped him back to the shed. That tank of mine turned me into a bigger drip than we expected, didn't it? Can we be friends again, please? Percy was delighted to agree.
It's nice, and I felt that the two are a lot closer after this book. I don't believe they have another argument or ever tease each other again after this. Book 33, Thomas and the Twins, is a pretty inspired volume, in which Thomas is sent to work on Edward's line while a bridge on his line is strengthened. This is one of the first times in a long time we see Thomas working in a new place on Sodor, interacting for the first time with Bill and Ben, characters that have always been there, but he's never met. I quite like how this touches on his friendship with Edward again, something I feel was sorely underused in the books. I love how after Bill and Ben get Thomas all riled up, Edward breaks up the commotion and leads Thomas away.
Thomas let off steam indignantly. "Let me tell you," he began. "All right, you two," laughed Edward. "Go and move those trucks or there won't be room for any more."
He knows Thomas well, and he knew to get him out of there before things got ugly.
"You just don't have to take them too seriously," explained Edward. Thomas smiled ruefully. "I wish I knew how you deal with them," he said.
I also quite like Book 35, Thomas and the Great Railway Show, which was written to promote the National Railway Museum in York. In this, Thomas is asked to visit the famous museum due to his popularity. There's even this meta moment when Thomas asks why people would want to see him, and Toby tells him it's because of the TV show.
"Why me?" Thomas asked Percy and Toby. "They've never even seen me." "Yes, they have," said Percy. "On television," added Toby. "The Fat Controller told us about it."
The book follows the misadventures that Thomas has on his way to York and during his stay there. It's a fun concept for a book, and I love all the real-world tie-ins. While Thomas has the biggest appeal of all the characters with the book's main audience, I will say, I don't think he is exactly the most interesting. He lacks that larger series-long character arc that some of the other mains have. He does have an arc, a pretty great one, but it's all contained mostly to his first book, and he doesn't change all that substantially following it. He's not without some nuances though, and is definitely a fun character. Clearly very easy to understand and write for. And maybe that's why, of the whole cast, Thomas was the one who stood out. Not every character needs some grandiose, deeper meaning to them, or an all-encompassing, series-long arc. Sometimes they can just be simple and fun. Simple and fun is easy to understand. And I think that may be the major appeal of this character. Everyone immediately gets who Thomas is just from his design. You see that shit-eating grin and you just know what this guy is all about. Thomas is cheeky. He's impatient, he's easily offended, he's impulsive, he's quite cocky, and he's rather competitive. But he's sympathetic. Flawed to be sure, but ultimately good at heart. A hard worker, and always does the right thing in the end. One could say that he's really useful.
Must go faster, must go faster, must go faster, must go faster, must go faster.
Oh, Thomas! Please slow down. Yes, I don't like it going so fast.
Aha! There he is! What luck!
Oh, come on! Move out of the way!
Bye, Bertie!
No!
We'll wait for you at the finish line!
Come on! 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 Come on!
Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
I got you now, Thomas!
Eat my dust, Bertie!
Thomas! Thomas, please!
No! First this blasted hill!
And that's how it's done.
Oh, finally. Never again.
Yes, Thomas. You know the Fat Controller doesn't approve of racing.
You got in trouble last time, if you recall.
Well, look who finally decided to show up. You know, Bertie, I would think after a dozen losses, you might actually try to win for once.
Oh, ha, Thomas. Real funny. You may gloat, but one of these days I'll finally beat you. You just wait and see.
Sounds like loser talk to me.
Thomas, don't be so rude.
See you, loser. Beat you later.
Mark my words, Thomas. I'll get the last laugh one day.
Big talk from such a small bass.
I say, Clarabelle, just listen to him. He's cockier than ever.
I agree, Annie. He's heading for trouble.
You know I can hear you, right? You both worry too much. By the time I reached the tunnel, it was over. Bertie always forgets about the hill. I swear, the fact he thinks he even stands a chance against me. He said he'd get the last laugh one day. Ha! He just doesn't get it. I'm indispensable, the pride of the line. I really don't know what the Fat Controller would do without me here to run this branch line. So what does that make us then? Just heaps of scrap iron? Don't be silly, Percy. I didn't mean it like that. I'd like to see you pull a stone train for once.
Yes, don't be daft, Thomas. You couldn't do all the work here on your own.
You don't think I could handle it? Ha! I can handle anything.
You just watch yourself, Thomas. You best be careful with all that swanking you're doing.
He's right, Thomas. You're both just jealous is all. I can handle myself. I am the number one, after all. Oh dear.
No point in talking sense to him, Percy. He's beyond help.
I'm sorry to say that Thomas's confidence streak only worsened from there.
Silly Percy, silly Toby. They don't know what they're saying.
Oh, Thomas, please be careful today.
Yes, watch yourself.
Pah! Everyone's against me. One day they'll learn.
Their journey started like any other. Thomas knew every part of his branch line, but today he was more careless than ever and wasn't paying attention to the path ahead. Had he been, he might have noticed the telegraph pole that had fallen onto his line in the night winds.
What's that? It looks like... Oh, gripes! Brakes! Thomas, brakes!
Cinders and ashes! We're off!
Well, that's torn it. No more work for us today. I'll walk back and phone for the breakdown gang.
Oh, real good going, Thomas.
Soon, Edward and the breakdown gang arrived to clean up the mess. Thomas remained unusually silent. Luckily, Thomas, Annie and Clarabelle weren't badly damaged, but the crash had bent the rails. The Fat Controller closed the line while it was repaired, and in the meantime, he put Thomas back in the yard. Thomas didn't take the news well.
He demoted me. Me! Can you believe that? All because of one little derailment.
Well, Thomas, I don't think he demoted you. He just needed to put you somewhere while your line is repaired. It's only temporary.
It's a demotion, Annie. He's using this crash as an excuse to punish me for racing Bertie.
Oh, stop it, Thomas. There's no one to blame here but yourself. We wouldn't be in this situation if you had just paid attention and looked where you're going. Honestly, Thomas, I think some time away from your branch line will do you good.
In 1983, Brett Allcroft received the green light to produce a TV series based on the Railway series, entitled Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, starring Thomas as the main character. The series first premiered in October 1984. As the show was named after Thomas, it should be no surprise that Thomas's first story, Thomas and Gordon, was moved forward to be the series premiere. The first words of the show are,
Thomas is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor. He's a cheeky little engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome.
Which tells us all we need to know. Season 1 kicks off with Thomas and Gordon, and firmly establishes Thomas and Gordon as the 2 main characters of the season. The show basically starts showing Thomas at his worst, being cheeky, rude, and picking on the big engines just because he can.
Wake up, lazy bones, do some hard work for a change. You can't catch me. And off he ran laughing.
And Gordon ain't no saint either, and puts Thomas in his place pretty swiftly. I just love how the first episode of the show follows the adventure of 2 characters who are both just kinda awful. Following this, both engines go on their own journeys. Thomas's journey follows the stories of his book, him trying again, and again to prove himself, and eventually receiving his branch line.
You're a really useful engine. You shall have a branch line all to yourself. Oh, thank you, sir, said Thomas.
We see the misadventures that he gets up to on his branch line, including leaving his guard behind, going fishing, getting stuck in the snow, and running into trouble with a policeman.
Where's your cow catcher, he asked. But I don't catch cows, sir. Don't be funny, snapped the policeman.
Gordon, meanwhile, has his own separate journey on the main line. More than once, he gets his comeuppance for being pompous, he leads a strike that fails horribly, and inadvertently runs himself into a ditch. Both journeys come together in the season's penultimate episode, Down the Mine. The story where the two characters have a laugh at each other's disgraces, and decide to put their differences aside to form an alliance.
Shall we form an alliance? You help me, and I'll help you. Right you are, agreed Thomas. Good, that's settled, rumbled Gordon. And buffer to buffer, the allies puffed home.
I love the decision to have this as basically the wrap-up. It puts into perspective just how much these two have gone through this season. A series of mistakes and comeuppances for each of them, culminating in a wonderful, humble moment of mutual self-reflection and forgiveness. Season 1 feels so complete as a result, as if it was all leading up to this moment. This alliance is eventually forgotten as time goes on, of course, but it does get a nice mention in Season 4.
Remember, Thomas, called Gordon grandly, united we stand, together we fall. You help me, and I'll help you.
I still stand by that this episode, Paint Pots and Queens, would have been a way better Season 1 finale than Thomas's Christmas party. Season 2 kicks off with Thomas, Percy, and the Coal, a story that is technically out of order as the season premiere. This episode erroneously shows Percy working on the branch line well before he was moved there. But I think the reason they chose to open with this is simple. It's our first ever Thomas and Percy episode. This season really put Percy in the spotlight, and having this as the opener establishes right out of the gate that the Thomas and Percy friendship dynamic is going to be a major cornerstone of the series moving forward. Even though they're friends, they're clearly not best friends at this point, which is ever evident by Thomas's comments.
Percy's had an accident, cried Toby. Botheration! That means I'll be late.
Season 2 shows Thomas at his most savage. It really feels like he has a bone to pick with pretty much everyone this year. Nearly every episode that features him involves him being skeptical or complaining to someone about whatever's grinding his gears that day.
Well, anyway, huffed Thomas, blue is the only color for a really useful engine. Everyone knows that. It's those main line engines. They dither about on the viaduct, and they blame Sir Topham Hatt's workmen. It's just an excuse for laziness, if you ask me. I'm green caterpillar with red stripes. You crawl like one, too. I don't.
Eesh, Thomas, calm down. Go drink some water, man. You might be wondering at this point, why on earth is this jerk the main character of this show? Like we talked about before, Thomas is no saint. He is littered with flaws. But flaws are what make a good main character. How boring would this show be if its main character was just perfect all the time and never made mistakes or got in trouble? That's what we have Edward for. He's the show's example of that perfect character that the others should strive to be, and is also probably why he doesn't get as much time in the spotlight as everyone else. What would Frasier be if its title character wasn't pompous and neurotic? What would The Simpsons be if Homer wasn't aggressive and unprofessional? What would SpongeBob SquarePants be if SpongeBob wasn't overly optimistic and naive to the world around him? And what would Thomas and Friends be if Thomas wasn't cheeky and impulsive? The answer to all of them is pretty dang boring. Flawed characters make for good stories, and it's why Thomas works so well as the face of this franchise. The kid audience learns through Thomas making mistakes. He basically shows us how not to act, and in that sense, he's a good role model, and fun to follow. Ultimately, I think making Thomas the main face of the series was an overall smart decision. Television is a different medium to books, and I think TV viewers instinctively desire that singular main face to connect with. Going into Season 3, Thomas lightens up quite a bit. You get this feeling that some time has passed since Season 2, and he's chilled out. He's quite a bit nicer, and a lot more willing to help others.
Don't worry, said Thomas kindly. I'll help out if you're ill.
It's probably not a coincidence that this nicer Thomas is mostly present in the episodes this season, not based on Railway Series stories. But there's still plenty of old cheeky Thomas left in him, though.
You look as if you've had a mud bath. Be a sensible engine and have a shower instead.
Yes, like how silly we look when our funnels turn into icicles. That's not funny.
I would say this is also around the time that him and Percy are really presented as best friends. We get a good number of episodes where the two are seen working alongside each other, or they team up to accomplish something, from their escapade with the dragon, saving the mail train service, and rescuing a snowbound mountain village. Season 3 is also the season where we started seeing Thomas in a lot more places that he probably shouldn't be. No longer is he mostly contained to his branch line. Now Thomas appears, well, everywhere. And this was a deliberate change on the show crew's part to ensure their main character stayed relevant. Wilbert Awdry rather infamously hated this.
They're so obsessed with the popularity of Thomas that they have what I can only call crane-shunted Thomas to all sorts of unlikely places in order to force him into a particular story, whether the story was written with Thomas in mind or not.
Wilbert in general was very critical of Season 3. I think some of his criticisms are a little unfair, personally, but I do get where he's coming from with this one. He created an entire world that works in a certain way, only for the show crew to come in and change it for essentially marketing reasons, to keep Thomas himself relevant. I get it. I'd probably be a little upset too if I were in his shoes. But I think this is the difference between a series with an ensemble cast, where you can go 10 books without a character appearing, and a TV series with a singular main character. If your main character doesn't appear in half the episodes, is he even the main character at that point? I'll just say this. If Wilbur thought Thomas popping up at Tidmouth Sheds, or Brendam Docks, or a random sawmill this season was bad, just imagine his reaction to the hit entertainment era. I don't think Thomas even runs a branch line in those seasons. One major aspect of Thomas in these early years that I absolutely love is his subtle character evolution over the first 5 seasons. Now, it's very subtle, and it's not directly stated at any point, but it's something that I've always noticed and appreciated. In the first season, Thomas was young, rebellious, and at his worst. And over the course of the show, he gradually mellows out and matures. I don't mean like Thomas was mean to Percy in Season 2, got his comeuppance, learned from that interaction, and so that's why he's nicer in Season 3. No, I don't mean it so literally. We are talking about an episodic TV series for kids, not some profound linear character drama like Breaking Bad or something.
Say my name.
What?
Say my name.
Thomas the Tank Engine.
You're goddamn right.
All I mean is that Thomas evolves over time into a respectable character. Season 4 saw the episode Thomas and the Special Letter. This was produced as the 100th episode of the series, and so it featured most of the established standard gauge cast in it. As the 100th, it also featured a big Thomas crash. Probably one of his funniest ever.
Just like this, he boasted.
Now, I have always seen this as the last big time that Thomas screws up. His final big crash that was completely his own dumb fault. And following that, moving on into Season 5, Thomas doesn't really make mistakes anymore. He still has his flaws, of course, still somewhat cheeky and teasing.
We can see what's been put upon you, said Thomas.
Still a little impatient.
Come on, Percy, this isn't time to have a rest.
And he takes joy in messing with the others.
Beware of the ghost, Toby, Thomas said. What ghost? Asked Toby. The old warrior ghost. Every night he lights his fire, then goes hunting. Toot toot! Goodbye.
Still the same old Thomas at his core. But most of the time this season, Thomas is presented as respectable and responsible. His only crash this season was one that wasn't even his fault. He's often depicted as a voice of reason.
It's George. He makes me feel down. Just ignore him, Puff Thomas.
We engines must pull together, whatever the weather. Come on. Your driver says it's time for a nice washdown. Then you'll feel much better.
I will always champion this moment from Make Someone Happy, where he's the one to tell James off for being selfish and rude.
Percy or Oliver should do it. I'm too important. Thomas was cross. James, why don't you think about something or someone else for a change? You'll be surprised at how much better you'll feel if you do.
Oh, how much he's changed over the years.
If we hurried across the viaduct, it might collapse, and then you'd have no passengers at all. What would you do then? Run my train on time, for one thing.
Again, it's a subtle evolution. It's not in your face or anything, and some could argue that it may not have even been intentional. But I feel Thomas seems so much more grown up by this point. He and the world of Sodor seem so aged and matured. It really feels like the events of Season 1 are many, many years behind us this year. I feel this evolution is also emphasized greatly with his theme music by Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell. Thomas's theme changed slightly every season, each time being portrayed in a way that sums up where the character is that year. In Season 1, Thomas's theme, as well as the rest of the score, is very synthy. It's very fast-paced, it's bouncy, and forward-moving, which accurately reflected his eager, hot-headed, hungry-for-more character that year. By Season 3, Thomas had started to cool off and lighten up, and his theme is arranged in a way that's a bit slower. It uses more harps and strings, which reflects his growing larger world that season. There's more instruments, it's more filled out, just like Thomas by this point. And by Season 5, Thomas has matured, and his theme is arranged completely differently. It's orchestral, it's so grand sounding, so much slower and atmospheric. The way it climaxes at the end there, there's such a feeling of finality and release to it. Disagree with me all you want here, but this has always been my interpretation of it. 2000 saw Thomas's first movie, Thomas and the Magic Railroad. And to be honest, I don't have much to say about Thomas in this. I like the voice actor they went with, Eddie Glenn. He does a really suiting Thomas voice, I think.
Little engines can do big things, especially when they have nice blue paint like me.
Now this movie has many problems, but I can't fault how Thomas is written in it. He has a fun energy to him. I like how cheeky he is to Gordon.
7, 8. Who do we appreciate? Practicing your numbers, Gordon. That's a good engine.
And I love how he's not afraid to stand up to Diesel 10.
We're really useful engines. You won't dominate us, and you won't destroy her. We won't let you.
When Diesel 10 first arrives, Thomas seems more annoyed by him than scared, which is a funny juxtaposition to Gordon, who is trembling in fear. If I were to change anything, it'd be to make Thomas a bit more active in the plot. Ultimately, he doesn't contribute anything substantial until he takes Lily back to Muffle Mountain, and that's a whole hour in. Until that point, he's just kinda doing his own thing. He pops up to say stuff to other characters or makes remarks or observations, and he's just not super integral. Following the movie, changes were made on the show staff. Britt Allcroft stepped down from her role as director of the company, and a team of new writers were brought in to help write more episodes so they could churn out a new season every year. Season 6, as far as Thomas is concerned, was pretty decent, I think. A lot of classic Thomasisms were at play this year. His disdain for his snowplow makes a return.
Big, horrid, awkward thing, Thomas grumbled.
He wants to show up Snooty Gordon by going faster than him, which he does.
Hi, Gordon. Bye, Gordon.
And he gets a big head from being chosen to collect a famous opera singer.
Move aside, Dirty Percy, chuffed Thomas. I'm the important engine today.
But, at the same time, He still has moments that feel like the cooled-off Thomas we saw in Season 5. He consoles Harvey when the others put him down, and he feels bad for Cyril the Fogman when he gets fired.
Poor Cyril, whispered Thomas. He's been scrapped.
I think, for the most part, they found a good middle ground here, of keeping Thomas in his more cooled-off state, but also keeping a lot of his classic Thomas-isms intact. However, this is around the time I would say Thomas's gradual backward aging starts to become a little noticeable, though. Scaredy Engines, I think, was our first real glimpse at the return of a more mean-spirited Thomas. In this, he gets a jolly out of making fun of Percy for being scared of the smelters.
Careful the ghost engine doesn't get you, Thomas said.
But I've always felt that this was a strong Thomas and Percy story, so it's never really bothered me. It's more apparent in Season 7. He does have some great selfless moments this year. 3 Cheers for Thomas is probably the best example of that, where he puts his race with Bertie on hold to help the children at sports day. But his naughtier, more mean-spirited ways are the focus of quite a few stories. Twice this year, he plays a mean prank on 2 different engines that backfire horribly. And he and Percy make fun of a fellow friend behind his back.
It may be sunny now, matey, but there be a storm coming.
It may be sunny now, matey, but there be a storm coming. There be a fierce storm on the way, Captain, peeped Percy.
I feel like these are the sort of actions that Season 1 Thomas would do. The thing is, though, I do get it. I get why Thomas had to be reverted to this more mischievous state as the show went on. If the show was intended to end at Season 5, then that character evolution would have been fantastic. But Thomas and Friends is not a self-contained story with an endpoint. It's a TV series made to continue on until, well, it stops making money. And as we discussed earlier, a perfect, no-mistake-making main character that has learned everything to be learned is just kind of boring. As much as I love Season 5, you do see some limitations with this portrayal of Thomas in it. Thomas features in many episodes, but there's really only one Thomas-centered story in that season. Thomas and the Rumors. In this, rumors spread about Harold. Thomas is depicted as the only one of the cast thinking rationally. He's not even concerned with the Harold stuff because he has his own noble goal, to help the children whose playground was shut down.
Thomas wanted to mention the children's playground, but solving the mystery of Harold and a special visitor came first.
The episode makes a notable shift of focus onto the other characters as it goes on, though, all of whom are not thinking clearly and giving in to the rumors.
Harold wants to get rid of us, said Gordon grimly. He doesn't need tunnels, added Henry.
Now, even though this is a Thomas story, the story doesn't fully focus on him because, well, he's not irrational like the others, not the flawed one, and he's not the one that learns the lesson at the end. This episode, I admit, may not be the best example to illustrate this, since it's apparently adapted from a magazine story that had Boko of all characters in Thomas's role, but I think my point still stands. I'm not saying writing a story for a mature Thomas isn't possible. It definitely is, and they've done it. But if you've reached a point where you can't keep the focus of a story on him because the others are more entertaining, then you've kind of limited yourself with what you can do with your own main character. There is absolutely more creative freedom with a main character who is majorly flawed and has a similar mindset to the main audience watching. Kids mostly watch Thomas, so logically, Thomas should be presented in a way that's relatable to them, hence this shift. Simple as. I think there can be a happy middle ground between the two that pleases everyone, and Season 6 hit it pretty well in my opinion. There is, of course, one big major pitfall with keeping Thomas in this more stagnant, childlike state. And that is seasonal rot. Enter Season 8, the start of the hit entertainment era. During my rewatch of the series for the retrospective, it was around Season 10 or so that I really started getting sick of Thomas. Thomas becomes a very boring, repetitive character in these later seasons. It's the same type of stories over and over again with him. Thomas learns not to rush his jobs. Thomas learns it's okay to share the big workload. Thomas learns to slow down and be aware of his surroundings. It's very rinse and repeat. I wouldn't say he's majorly out of character in these types of episodes, but he's definitely dumber, and none of what he learns ever sticks, and that becomes very grating when watching all the episodes in order. Now, we talked about earlier how Thomas was fairly stagnant in the books too, but it never came off as repetitive because Wilbert devoted so much time to other characters and all new parts of Sodor that kept things interesting. In the show, though, we keep returning to Thomas over and over again, and doing the same plots over and over again. I mean, really, do we really need 13 Thomas-centered episodes in a 26-episode season? Wouldn't, 5 or 6 be enough, with supporting roles and others? I get he's the main character, yeah, but yeesh, let some of the others have the spotlight for a bit. Because Thomas is so much dumber and overused in these seasons, it makes the sparse moments where he is portrayed as a voice of reason feel very out of character.
You should try asking nicely for a change.
It's simple, whistled Thomas. Look at where you want to go, then follow the track that will take you there.
Sometimes the thing you want is somewhere you wouldn't think to look.
This fortune cookie saying is coming from the same guy who earlier this same season did not know what a rainbow was.
Look at all those colors, Edward, gasped Thomas. That's a rainbow, puffed Edward wisely.
Thomas is not exactly the most consistent character in this era. These types of moments would be much better suited for a wiser character, but that would mean one less Thomas appearance in a season, and we can't have a season where Thomas isn't in every episode, right? Now, my criticisms aside, the hit era is not without its gems, though, and every so often would give us a really good Thomas story. I'll always champion Season 9's Thomas and the Statue as my favorite Thomas episode of this whole era, for it's the first episode in a long time at this point that Thomas's cocky side reappears. In this one, he thinks a statue is of him, and he begins bragging about it. No one really pays him any mind at first, but he keeps going on and on about it until finally they've all had enough. Even Edward gets annoyed with him. Percy flat out tells Thomas what everyone is feeling.
Please stop talking about the statue. No one wants to hear about it anymore. No one wants to talk to you anymore, Percy added crossly. And neither do I.
After this, Thomas feels so guilty that he offers to plow the lines so that all the others can reach their destinations. This, of course, carries some weight because we know just how much Thomas hates wearing his snowplow. It's an episode that brings all these core elements of Thomas's character together to create a meaningful story, complete with a rather heartfelt ending.
I think this statue of us all is the best statue that could ever be. And all the engines agree.
Season 11's Hector the Horrid I really enjoy too. I enjoy this one mostly for breaking the routine 3-strike formula and telling an effective story about Hector. But Thomas is pretty great in this. The scene with Rosie really sticks out to me. While it's fairly short-lived, I've always liked the whole big brother, little sister dynamic that she and Thomas had in these seasons. This whole episode, Thomas is scared to go near Hector, but as soon as Hector frightens Rosie away, Thomas gets defensive and finally stands up to him. You mess with my little sister? Well, you deal with me. It's a powerful moment for him. You know what? I'm going to give Saving Edward a shout too. Now, this is a pretty mid-Edward episode, honestly, that gets him totally wrong, but Thomas is really good in this. Edward fears being scrapped after finding it hard to build steam, and Thomas looks up to Edward so much that he offers to do all his work for him to keep him out of trouble, even if it means lying to the Fat Controller.
Where is Edward? Edward took on the wrong sort of coal, sir. The wrong sort of coal? What nonsense, Thomas!
I love the lengths that he's willing to go to help his old friend out. A rare instance of the bond that these two share. The hit era did consistently put a spotlight on an aspect of Thomas's character that I really enjoy that the show didn't do much with prior, and that is his rivalry with James. They loved pairing these two up in these seasons, and it makes sense. Thomas and James are similar in a lot of ways. They're both pretty cocky, they're both competitive, and neither of them are the brightest bulbs in the box. They essentially bring out the worst in each other. And that creates some fun moments, such as Thomas laughing at James when he breaks down.
Hello, busted boiler, teases Thomas. You don't look very useful now.
Thomas trying to sabotage James so he can collect a football team, which horribly backfires. Or their petty competition in keeping each of their rake of trucks clean, which doesn't end well for either of them.
The trucks bumped into the back of Thomas, and the coal spilled all over the tracks. Just then, Cranky's cable snapped. He dropped a large crate of melons.
I love me a good Thomas versus James episode, and I find them to be some of the more entertaining ones of the hit era. Put these two knuckleheads together, and chaos is guaranteed to ensue. While the model hit era overall wasn't great, it did sure go out with a bang. The Great Discovery marked the end of the model era, being the final project to use an all-model production. This movie brought out everyone for it. So many engine characters appear, all the narrow gauge engines, even the pack returns. But even with such a bloated cast, at its core, The Great Discovery tells a story entirely about Thomas. One day, Thomas gets diverted onto old tracks and stumbles across the lost town of Great Waterton. Upon his discovery, Sir Topham has the town restored, and he puts Thomas in charge of the project. This major responsibility, of course, goes to Thomas's head. A new engine called Stanley arrives to do Thomas's work while he's away, and Thomas, of course, becomes jealous of him. Seeing him pull Annie and Clarabelle, getting compliments from the big engines, and having fun with Percy. It's almost like the amazing discovery he made and the honor that he was given doesn't even matter to him anymore. All because someone else was having fun with his friends. Thomas eventually goes too far and tries to sabotage Stanley by deliberately giving him too many trucks, and disaster occurs. Everything crumbles, all because Thomas couldn't handle someone else having the spotlight. It's a clever story, honestly. You think Stanley is the antagonist when we first meet him, but he's really just a nice guy. The real villain here is Thomas's own ego, and how he lets it control his actions. This is really a story about Thomas's own battle with himself and his inner conflict. His ego is his biggest obstacle to overcome, and only once he's fully humbled himself can Thomas allow himself to be happy and content again. This movie was a big goodbye to the model era, of course, but it feels like a big goodbye to Thomas himself. He went through such a big arc here. It really feels like a big finale. I could go into season 12, but frankly, I have nothing to say about it, and I'd rather just end this section with The Great Discovery. It just feels more appropriate. I think the model series overall really justified Thomas being its main character. He has so much range as a character, and he has such unique relationships with the greater main cast, which creates so much story potential. I loved watching him grow up across those early seasons, and even when those later seasons started to meander, there were still bright spots. We did also see some of the side effects of making Thomas the main as we got into those later seasons. Some character backtracking, and he was in general very overused. A lot of repetition there, and frankly, a lot of episodes that you can just skip and not miss anything. But they brought it home beautifully with The Great Discovery. Thomas is a great main character. His flaws are what make him so fun to follow, even when he's at his worst.
Thomas shunted trucks in the yard. He felt his position deeply, and he took his anger out on the trucks.
Watch it, will you?
Take that!
Well, isn't this a lovely sight? Thomas the Tank Engine back in the yard?
Oh, hi, Bertie.
I heard about your accident. Shame about that. But guess what? I've been assigned to take your passengers for you. But don't worry, I'll take good care of them. So good that they may never want to ride your bumpy rails again after riding a smooth red bus like me.
No!
See you, Thomas. Enjoy your retirement.
Oh, ha ha. Real funny, Bertie.
Later that day, Thomas returned to the sheds for a rest, but he wasn't alone.
Well, looky here, Henry. So it is true. James told us you were back in our yard.
Oh, no.
We heard about your little accident. Not your finest moment, was it? No matter how long it's been, you're still that silly little tank engine that got dragged behind the express all those years ago. Sorry, Thomas. I got a little carried away there. Only teasing.
Oh, it's not you, Gordon. It's just everything. I don't want to be stuck in the yard again. All these years and I'm right back where I started.
Well, if you want my take on it, every shunter here has been promoted to go work on some line from working hard. You, Percy, Duck, we would know. Every time you've all left us to shunt our own coaches. Ugh.
Oh, don't remind me.
Anyways, my point is, you got your branch line from working hard in the yard before, so do it again.
Yeah, Thomas, be the best shunter you can be, and the Fat Controller will surely come around. He always does.
Show him you are the shining example of a perfect engine. It's just like you used to say. Hard work pays off, right?
Ah, you're right. That's what I'll do. Thanks, you two.
And so, Thomas did as Gordon and Henry advised. For the next week, he worked very hard. He shunted trucks in the yard. He pushed coaches for the big engines. And he even took goods trains for the others. All without complaint. And to his delight, the plan worked. The Fat Controller was very impressed.
Right on time, Thomas. A great effort. I've noticed a big turnaround in your work ethic, and I have to say I am quite pleased with you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
As you've been so helpful this week, I have a new job for you. Our newcomer Oliver has just returned from the works. Before he goes off to Duck's Line, I'd like you to teach him how to shunt coaches. Show him how we do things here. Can I trust you with that?
Oh, yes, sir. Of course, sir.
That's a good engine. He's waiting in the yard for you.
So Thomas showed Oliver how to shunt coaches. Thomas enjoyed being in charge for once. But the responsibility, unfortunately, went to his head.
My own branch line. It's not far from here. The Fat Controller gave it to me for being really useful. I hear you auto tanks are fast engines. I'm pretty fast too, you know. I often race this bus called Bertie along my line, and I always win. He always gets slowed on the hill, but not me. I just whoosh through the tunnel and stop an inch from the buffers. Want to see?
That's all right, Thomas.
Just like this. Watch!
Whoa! No! No! Whoa! No! 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 Oh no!
Luckily, no one was hurt. But Thomas was in quite a state.
Oh.
After a couple years of experimentation, Hit Entertainment officially switched Thomas and Friends over to full CGI animation in 2009. This new medium presented the world of Sodor in a way that had never been depicted before. Now the engines could be shown from new angles, their mouths finally moved, and they permanently gained their own voices, separate from the narrator.
Your fans are going to get to hear you speak in your own voice for the very first time. How do you feel about that?
Bubbling boilers! Every useful engine has their own story to tell.
Before we get into the history of CGI Thomas, let's talk about Thomas's many voices through the CGI series. Ben Small first voiced Thomas in the UK, and Martin Sherman in the US. I think both had some growing pains finding their groove with the character at first, but it all came together as time went on. They each gave a very different performance. Ben Small voices Thomas with a younger, higher-pitched, childlike voice.
Good morning, James. Good morning, Henry. Where are you puffing to?
Which suited the sort of stories that they were telling with Thomas at the time. Sherman gave Thomas more of a teenager voice. I believe he himself said that he envisioned Thomas as a 15-year-old.
I will meet Spencer at dawn, and I will win.
A very different performance here, and I don't know, I like it. I like seeing a slightly older take on Thomas, and I appreciate how natural the voice sounds. He sounds so normal compared to some of the other characters.
Hello, are you Thomas?
Yes, I am.
In 2014, the cast was overhauled, and Small and Sherman left the series. John Hassler and Joseph May came in to voice Thomas for the UK and US respectively, both making their debuts in the special, The Adventure Begins. John Hassler is like the perfect in-between of Small and Sherman. Thomas still has that higher-pitched voice that we associate with him, but it somehow sounds more natural, if that makes sense.
They're pleased to see me. They've never seen me pulling a train before. Oh, it's nice of them to wave.
Hassler is my personal favorite Thomas voice. Joseph May, on the other hand...
Just to the next signal box, ladies. First past the post wins the race.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this take. This voice doesn't really suit Thomas very well, in my opinion. It just sounds, I don't know, generic, forced, especially with that Pillsbury Doughboy-like giggle he does for him.
It makes me look as if I'm going on safari.
Like Funfetti.
He's alright, depending on the episode. I think he did a great job in Lost Treasure. But overall, it's a Thomas voice that doesn't really work for me, personally. Alright, let's get into the seasons themselves. The first 4 seasons of the CGI era were animated by Nitrogen Studios, and headed by then head writer Sharon Miller, who wrote a majority of the episodes. Things kicked off with the special Hero of the Rails, and frankly, this is the most likable Thomas ever was in this era. In this, he comes across an old abandoned engine called Hero, and vows to get him steaming again, no matter the cost.
I promise I will make you a really useful engine once more. I will make you master of the railway again!
His loyalty and his promise to Hero is commendable, and it's a shame that this side of Thomas is hardly touched on again after this. Hero of the Rails is solid and a pretty fun watch, and it's a total shock to the system going from it to the seasons that directly follow it. Because, to put it bluntly, the Nitrogen seasons are not good. The writing is lazy, and I would go as far to say it was Thomas the character's lowest point of the franchise. For the overwhelming majority of these 4 seasons, Thomas is portrayed as an absolute doofus who does the dumbest things imaginable.
Take the truck through the woods.
Don't worry, Hero. I will.
So, Thomas didn't take the track through the wood as Hero had told him to.
I must make sure those crows stay away.
So Thomas puffed after the crows, leaving the field behind.
Look, that's perfect. I can ride to the mainland on that.
The chains are rusty.
Don't worry. I make good decisions.
Thomas! He blew his wonky whistle loud and long.
You're telling me that Thomas can't hear how messed up his whistle is? You're kidding me, right? I'm currently rewatching the Nitrogen seasons for the retrospective, and I gotta say, Thomas is just unbearable in these. He is easily my least favorite character of the main cast. He's just too stupid to root for. In the model hit seasons, he was repetitive and overused, but they still did some fun stuff with him. Now he's repetitive, overused, and unlikable.
Thomas felt terrible. 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 Thomas felt
Oh my god, it's still going?
Thomas felt terrible. Thomas felt terrible. Thomas felt
Don't say it!
The nitrogen seasons admittedly have their little moments here and there. I thought season 16's Happy Birthday Sir was rather decent. An episode where Thomas and Winston try to find an old carriage as a birthday gift for Topham. But these nice moments are so scarce and overshadowed by the dumb. There was also such a heavy focus on Thomas and Percy's best friendship in these seasons, which isn't a bad thing per se, but it's not exactly the most interesting thing to focus on. So many other hallmarks of Thomas's character have seemingly been forgotten by this point. Like, by season 15, when was the last time Thomas had a race with Bertie? When was the last time he dealt with fish, or was shown disliking wearing his snowplow? Does he even still talk to Annie and Clarabelle? When was the last time it was even mentioned that Thomas had a branch line? Things all changed in 2012, when a man named Andrew Brenner came onto the scene. Brenner previously worked on Thomas as a writer for the magazines in the late 80s, and was brought onto the show writing team in 2010. His first job was editing the script for the 2012 special, Blue Mountain Mystery. And boy, oh boy, it is immediately evident that someone else was in the writing room when you watch this thing. Dialogue feels natural again. There's no repetition or rhyming, and the new characters are all quite memorable. The biggest scene to me that screams, Brenner was here, is the opening scene with Thomas, Annie, and Clarabelle. A scene that, in fact, takes place on Thomas's branch line. Holy crap, it does still exist. And Annie and Clarabelle actually speak.
Clattering carriages! Slow down, Thomas!
Slow down! Slow down! The signal is red!
This movie really felt so unlike the drivel that preceded it. Blue Mountain Mystery was such a game changer, and it's remarkable how likable Thomas himself is in this. He is the protagonist, but it's a little different this time. He's more of a Nick Carraway type of character, who observes all that's happening around him and makes connections, more so than being super active in the events of the plot. At least, not till the third act or so. It's so wonderful following a version of Thomas that I actually want to root for again. Andrew Brenner became head writer for the series following Blue Mountain Mystery, starting with season 17. There were a lot of changes made behind the scenes this season, gaining an all-new producer and writing team. And right away, you can tell that some work had been done to improve Thomas himself. The first episode of the season that came out was Gordon Runs Dry, and I will never forget that opening scene. Thomas strolls up to Gordon complaining about whatever at Knapford, and he teases him.
Where are my coaches? I shouldn't be kept waiting.
Maybe you should fetch your own coaches, Gordon.
Ha!
And I just got this cozy feeling of relief. I'm home again. The Thomas we love is back, baby. They brought Thomas back to his roots almost immediately, shining a spotlight on so many core aspects of his character that had long been forgotten. Thomas now primarily runs his branch line again, and we get so many adventures that take place on it. Thomas and Bertie actually race each other again. Thomas hates wearing his snowplow. Thomas teases the big engines. Thomas looks up to Edward. Thomas and Percy are still best friends, but it's not the only thing that's focused on. They greatly pulled back from forcing Thomas into so many episodes too. He is the star of a handful, sure, but they let a lot of other characters have the spotlight, even the really obscure ones. The world of Sodor felt so much fuller again. But one of the greatest things that the Brenner era did with Thomas, at least in my opinion, is how much time they focused on the relationship between him and Annie and Clarabelle. Annie and Clarabelle were really just props in the previous eras. Like, it was clear that Thomas loved them and got offended on their behalf.
Those coaches are old and uncomfortable. Why don't you use them as beach huts instead? Thomas was most upset. You won't let them turn Annie and Clarabelle into beach huts, will you?
But they never really participated in stories. Do you know how many times Thomas pulled Annie and Clarabelle in an episode, and the writers either forgot that they were alive, or just chose to not have them speak? There's a number of times where them speaking up would have prevented a lot of trouble. But no, they were just treated as props essentially, and we never really learned much about them other than they exist. But ever since Blue Mountain Mystery, These two are now actual characters. Their relationship with Thomas has never been stronger, and there is no greater example of this than the Season 18 episode, Not So Slow Coaches. In this episode, we start by seeing a glimpse of the daily life between Thomas and the coaches. Thomas always tries to push his limits, and Annie and Clarabelle always nag him. It's clear that they all love each other, but they grow fed up with each other too. Annie and Clarabelle don't like going fast, and Thomas doesn't like always being told what to do by them. Things change one day when the coaches accidentally get coupled to Caitlin the Streamliner and get dragged on a high-speed ride to the mainland. Thomas, who catches them departing at the very last second, without a moment's haste, sets chase after them.
Wait, Caitlin! Come back!
He doesn't even think about it. He just realizes his coaches are in trouble, and he is off to save them. Like, realistically, there is no way Thomas could catch up with Caitlin. She is a streamliner going at high speeds, but he doesn't care. His emotions overpower him, and he races across the entire island to save his girls.
Annie! Clarabelle!
Annie and Clarabelle, meanwhile, are in agony. They've never gone this fast before, and they quickly realize perhaps they've been too harsh on Thomas all this time.
I'll never complain about Thomas again! Nor will I!
Thomas eventually reaches the edge of the island, but the bridge is up.
I'll never be able to catch up with Caitlin now!
All hope seems lost. Annie and Clarabelle are gone. But thankfully, good old Hero comes to the rescue and brings Annie and Clarabelle back. The episode wraps up with a heart-to-heart between the trio as they travel home. Thomas apologizes for pushing his limits, and the coaches apologize for nagging. Everyone learned a lesson, and their bond has never been stronger. They all know now not to take each other for granted. I've said in the past that this is my favorite episode of the CGI series, and I still stand by that. I think it is just so goddamn wholesome, and it really showed how much potential there is in stories centered around this trio. Let's talk backstory. The Adventure Begins came out towards the middle of the Brenner run, and it was made in honor of the franchise's 70th anniversary. Holy crap, this was 10 years ago. God, I'm so old. This movie was a modern retelling of the first 2 books of the Railway series, or the first 7 episodes of the Model series. Thomas's origin story, basically. This was the first time we got any glimpse of Thomas's life pre-Sodor, showing up to the railway still painted in his original LBSC colors. However, the story is altered a bit to fit this retelling. Instead of Thomas and Edward being the first engines on the railway, now Thomas shows up well after the other characters, and the explanation of why he is number 1 was changed to him inheriting it from Glyn, a coffee pot engine that worked the railway previously before being withdrawn. While I can see some people being annoyed by this change, I get why it was done. It makes Thomas so much more of a fish out of water here. He is our protagonist, our audience stand-in, and it's more satisfying for the audience to experience and learn about this world for the first time through our main character's eyes.
And who are you?
I'm Thomas.
We learn what Henry's deal is by Edward explaining it to Thomas, aka us. Or we learn who the coffee pots are by, again, Edward explaining it to Thomas, aka us. It also creates a better underdog story. Everyone puts their noses up at the new guy, and that makes us want to root for him from the start. I do think an unfortunate side effect of writing the story this way is how it changes the span of time that Thomas was actually stuck in the yard for. Prior, it was implied that Thomas had been stuck in the yard for years, hence his desire for a change of scenery. Whereas here, he's been there for a month, maybe? And then he gets his branch line. He yearns to see the world.
But I want to go places and do things. I want to
see the world!
Despite just recently trekking across the UK from Brighton to get there.
Where are you from? Oh, Brighton, on the mainland.
The more you think about it, the more it stops making sense. Regardless of the changes, I fully accept it as the CGI canon's take on the origin story. One of the best things The Adventure Begins really put a spotlight on, in my opinion, was Thomas's friendship with Edward. This is something that the books, and the model series to an extent, really missed out on using more. It's always been clear that Thomas respects Edward in the previous eras,
Why, Edward could beat you in a race any day. Really? Said James.
Thomas and Percy were cross. Edward was their friend.
But here we actually get to see why. Edward is his mentor, and the only of the bunch to really give Thomas a chance. He explains things to Thomas, and Thomas comes to him for advice. And they continue this after the movie in several episodes. Thomas gets advice from Edward on how to handle Max and Monty and mucking about. Edward looks out for Thomas when his sandbox fails in A Cranky Christmas. And Edward compares the newcomer Philip to Thomas when he first arrived in Philip to the Rescue.
That little box cap can be very cheeky sometimes.
Yes, reminds me of a little tank engine who wanted to see the world.
I love this moment. Even before the adventure begins, Brenner was already playing with this friendship, as seen in Season 18's Old Reliable Edward, when Thomas comes up with a plan to pay Gordon out for being rude to Edward.
Maybe it's time we taught that big engine a lesson.
Between this and Annie and Clarabelle, I really get the impression that there were certain relationships that Brenner felt were missing within the show, and once he was head writer, he quickly pushed those to the forefront. I feel that there are basically two different versions of Thomas in the Brenner era that they switch between depending on the episode, both of which I think are pushed to each of their limits in the two movies, The Adventure Begins and Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. Ironically, both came out the same year. The Adventure Begins portrays Thomas as nice. A little too nice. Here he is depicted as a nice guy from the start. I get it, they made him nice to contrast the big snooty engines, but it sort of feels a little untrue of the character, and it kinda misses the point of the book. Thomas was meant to be a prick at the start of that book. Him getting his just desserts from Gordon in Thomas and Gordon was deserved. He was essentially an unlikable protagonist, starting at a low point. When he messed up, we laughed at him. But over the course of the book, he improved himself, and he got to a point where he won us over, and we wanted to see him succeed. Whereas here, he's already well-mannered from the beginning. Like, he consoles Henry about his fear of the rain a couple times.
Rain is just water, the same as you put in your boiler. So, how can you be afraid of it?
He's a total gentleman to Annie and Clarabelle when he first meets them.
I'm terribly sorry, your ladyships. You see, I'm new around here.
Etc. The most Thomas-y thing that he does here is wake Gordon up from his slumber.
Wake up, lazy bones! Why don't you work hard like me?
Which, of course, only happens because, well, it happened in the book, and Gordon needed a motivation to pull one over on him later. He doesn't really change that much over the course of the story. He does change, he becomes more patient and a little less clumsy.
Uh-oh.
But that's about it. I'm not a huge fan of this nice Thomas. It's okay. He's certainly more likable here than he was in the Nitrogen seasons, and I do still like The Adventure Begins for what it is. It's a fun time. But I prefer Thomas with a little more bite to him, especially here in what is supposed to be him at his youngest. Cue Lost Treasure. Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure is almost like an unofficial sequel to The Adventure Begins. It certainly feels that way watching them back to back. Now we've shot forward to present day. Thomas has been on his branch line for years now, and his characterization has kind of 180'd. Now he's way more cheeky, cocky, and confident.
My branch line is the most important part of the whole railway. I'll always be Sir Topham Hatt's #1 engine.
And when he doesn't get his way, he mopes and complains.
Sir Topham Hatt has taken my branch line away and given it to some other tank engine called Ryan.
His overconfidence is his essential flaw in this movie, of course, and over the course of the story, he learns to check himself. I like this, and I get what they were doing here. Thomas has been riding his high horse on his branch line for so long that he's grown a big head, and he needs to be brought back down to earth. Of the two, this version of Thomas feels a lot truer to me. Some of the best episodes of this era use this cheekier, cockier side of Thomas. Not So Slow Coaches, as we already talked about, Thomas the Quarry Engine, Bradford the Brake Van, Thomas and the Emergency Cable, among others. But there's also plenty of great episodes that use that nicer, more responsible Thomas too. See Lost Property, Thomas the Babysitter, Unscheduled Stops, Terrence Breaks the Ice, among others. In the past, I've criticized this and called Thomas inconsistent in this era, but I now have a new perspective on it. Both of these two takes being used interchangeably creates a rather well-rounded main character. The naughty Thomas episodes always make it clear that his intentions are good, and the nice Thomas episodes have moments of his impulsive side poking through.
So, I won't stop at all!
That's a terrible idea, Thomas!
They found a nice middle ground, I feel. It's kind of like Season 6 Thomas that I talked about liking earlier. Unlike the hit era and Nitrogen seasons, where I feel Thomas's dumber side is just way overused, which of course make the scenes where he's the voice of reason just feel out of place. They knew now to save most of the wise voice of reason stuff for characters like Edward, and save the really dumb plots for characters who are, well, kinda dumb or scatterbrained. You know, ones that they feel appropriate for. Thomas in this era, at his core, is a nice guy with a good heart, but he has his demons, and he sometimes lets his impulsive side drive his actions. I can't actually think of an episode or movie in the Brenner era where Thomas was severely out of character. In all honesty, The Adventure Begins might be the biggest offender here, and it almost feels wrong to say that. Then Bwaba happened. 2018 was a year of big change for the show. The show soft rebooted itself into Thomas and Friends' Big World, Big Adventures, in which half of each new season saw Thomas visiting other countries. This was done deliberately as an attempt to expand the brand to other potential markets of the world by catering directly to them, in the form of bringing Thomas to them in the show. And their justification for this was Thomas's line in his first book, where he said he wanted to see the world.
I'm tired of pushing coaches. I want to see the world.
Obviously, this was just an excuse. Literal globe-trotting was not the original intention of that line. The other half of the show took place back on Sodor, which also saw a ton of changes. There were cast changes, implementation of more fantasy sequence dream crap, and the engines all gained the ability to gesture their bodies around freely when they spoke, like Cars characters. By all accounts, the show pretty much did everything it could to become a cartoon, while still trying to hold on to a semblance of what it was before. These two approaches totally clashed, and it really felt in these last few seasons that Thomas and Friends was having a major identity crisis. An identity crisis that continued to plague it for the several years that followed. But how was Thomas himself handled here? Frankly, I find Thomas annoying in this era. It seems like a repeat of the same issues we saw before in the hit era. He's just so overused. All the international episodes feature him, as well as having Sodor-centric stories devoted to him too. And on top of all of that, Thomas became the narrator in this era.
#1 engine! One day, when I was working on the Chinese railway, I was running a little late.
He's everywhere, we can't escape him. There's a lot I could pick apart about the Big World era, about how Thomas being in these countries is never explained, about how Thomas being in the Sodor episodes is confusing, and it's never explained if these take place before or after the international stuff, or how the Bwaba movie proved the show could survive without a narrator, only for the show to shove Thomas in as one. But I don't know, I mean, these problems aside, I think my biggest issue with Thomas in this era is that he just doesn't feel like Thomas anymore. He just seems like a generic cartoon character in these episodes. A fish out of water just to have culture stuff be explained to. He feels more like Thomas in the regular Sodor episodes. Maybe that's just because he's in his element there, I don't know. But even those I find are somewhat hard to enjoy. Nonetheless, the show's identity crisis led to its demise. Audiences weren't interested, and so only 3 seasons in, it was announced that Season 24 would be the final season of Thomas and Friends proper. So, how did they end things? They went out with a special, Thomas and the Royal Engine, produced in honor of the 75th anniversary in 2020. In this, Sir Topham is to be presented an award by the Queen herself, and by request of Prince Charles, Thomas is to escort him to London. The special follows their adventure to the big city and all the scrapes that they have along the way. After several misfortunes and helping out an engine in need, the duo do make it to London, but in quite a state. You know, if you were to ask me to write a finale to the series, I would probably try to think of something that involves all the main characters in some way. Some big event akin to like The Great Discovery or something. But this finale takes a more subdued approach, and instead of having it focus on everyone, it instead focuses solely on Thomas and Sir Topham. The Thomas and Topham dynamic is one that is very overlooked, I think. From day one, it's always been clear that Thomas has a great respect for Topham and wants to please him. He seems so crushed whenever he upsets him. And it's also been very clear that Topham admires Thomas for his persistence and has a soft spot for him. Thomas trying to prove his worth to Topham is the story arc that basically kicked off everything, and now we've come full circle. The show started with Thomas proving himself to Topham, and it ended with Thomas proving how invaluable he is to him again, one final time. I think the decision to focus such a momentous episode on these two specifically was very inspired. It's not the finale I expected, but one I'm very happy with.
It is my pleasure to present to you a special crest, signifying to all that you have truly been, if you don't mind me saying, a royally useful engine.
Going by production order, the final ever production of the series is this stupid, dumbass episode where Thomas dresses up as a monkey.
Just ask for Cheeky Monkey Thomas.
We're just gonna ignore that. The Royal Engine is the final canon event, as far as I'm concerned. What a wild ride, man. Thomas in CGI might be the most turbulent of any character we've covered in Sodor's Finest so far. He started out pretty solid in Hero of the Rails, then he fell to a new low immediately. Then for a good while he was great and lovable again. Then he fell to another new low, and somehow ended solid. A real roller coaster. And so we reached the end of our Thomas deep dive. And now it's time to choose. Which of the three eras do I think portrayed Thomas the best? Well, I love his backstory in the Railway series. I love the story of how Thomas originated and how he has such a purposeful place in the railway system. But I also love the subtle maturing arc in those first 5 seasons of the Model series. Thomas grew as a character alongside the audience, and that's something I think is so cool in a kid's show. But then I also love the relationships between Thomas and Annie and Clarabelle, and Thomas and Edward, and Thomas and Topham, and pretty much everyone in the CGI series. And just how overall well-rounded he was as a main character in CGI, at least in the Brenner seasons. Each era has its pros as well as its cons, and I'm finding it kind of impossible to choose one. I don't think I really like one more over the other, to be honest. I think it comes down to your own personal preference. Which do you value more? The realism of the backstory, the character arc, or the character relationships? I value all three pretty highly, so I'm going to do an all-time first in Sodor's Finest and choose this. The best version of Thomas is a mesh of all three eras. Give me a Thomas with the backstory from the books, who matures over time, with the on-screen relationships he has with pretty much everyone in CGI. That would be a pretty perfect Thomas. At least, to me, anyway. But if there's anything we've learned from this long deep dive, it's that Thomas, in any of his forms, is far from perfect.
Evening, Thomas. Have the whole shed to yourself tonight,
Yeah.
I take it the Fat Controller gave you an earful already.
Yeah. He said it'll be a long time before I'm back at work. Percy's going to pull Annie and Clarabelle for me.
Well, that's nice of him. Oh, don't be so down. So you had an accident. It happens to the best of us. It's not your first one.
You're right. It's not. And that's just it, Edward. I always screw up. I tried so hard to be the perfect engine, I really did. But even when I'm good, I still manage to mess up. Maybe me getting a branch line was a fluke this whole time. Gordon was right from the start. I'm still just a silly little tank engine.
Thomas, there's no such thing as a perfect engine. It doesn't exist. No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. We all slip up sometimes. We all have flaws. Believe it or not, I can be pretty impatient myself.
What? You?
Oh, yes. I hate being tardy. You remember that day when they finally let me out of the shed again? I was so eager to work that I hurried the poor guard. Oh, where is that guard? Aren't we ever going to start?
Have you seen the guard?
No.
Have you seen the guard?
No.
Have you seen the guard?
Yeah, I have.
Huh?
Last night.
Oh! The only thing we can do is learn from our flaws and our failures, and try to be the best version of ourselves that we can. Put our best wheel forward. Think about it, Thomas. Think of all the good you have done in the past, just from being yourself, flaws and all. All of those that you've helped and saved.
You're a really useful engine.
Shall we form an alliance? You help me and I'll help you.
I'll try, sir. We must rescue her. We must.
And I've no doubt you will continue to do great things in the future.
3 cheers for Thomas, the #1 engine.
Thanks to you, Thomas. I am very proud of you.
The best friend I could ever have.
He's my hero. He's my friend.
And you're our hero, Thomas.
Because you're a really useful engine and will find a way.
I can find another hat, but I'll never find another Thomas.
So you see, Thomas, that's why you got your branch line. It was no fluke. You may not be perfect per se, but the Fat Controller saw something in you that you don't see in yourself. I know you feel down right now, but that will pass. Time heals all wounds. Everything will get better.
Do you really think so, Edward?
I know so. I promise you that.
Edward left Thomas with a lot to think about that night. And a few weeks later, when Thomas returned home from the works, he was back to his normal self again. And eventually, Thomas did return to his branch line.
Annie! Clarabelle!
Oh, Thomas!
Oh, how I've missed you both. Listen, I'm really sorry for everything I've put you through.
Oh, that's all right, Thomas. We're just glad to have you back.
Indeed.
Come along now. We're rather late.
We're coming along. We're coming along.
Thomas does work hard, but he does still make mistakes, and he does still slip up on occasion.
Hello, Thomas. Back from retirement so soon, eh?
Oh, shut up, Bertie.
And he still sometimes lets his competitive side get the best of him. He is imperfect, but that's okay. Because that's what makes him Thomas.
In the spirit of the 80th, today's pick of the week is going to How to Write Good Thomas Stories by the Thomas Theorist. I read a lot of Wilbert Awdry's biography, The Thomas the Tank Engine Man, in preparation for this video, and it really puts a lot of his stories and creations in a new light. This video talks about how Wilbert wrote the Railway series, and the rules he abided by when crafting his stories. Continuity, realism, brevity, pruning paragraphs into shorter digestible chunks that were easy to read aloud. A lot of work went into his process, and Adam's video here covers all of it. It's very well researched. All the information is taken from one of the talks at Audrey Extravaganza last year, so you know it's accurate. Go give this video a watch. It'll give you a new appreciation of Wilbert's work, and just may help you with writing your own stories. This Sodor's Finest was the biggest one yet. I knew that Thomas was going to be a massive hill to climb, and I never expected this video to be nearly 2 hours long. I mean, I guess I shouldn't have been all that surprised. He is the main character, after all. This big project would not have been possible without all of the people who contributed their talents to make it happen. Massive kudos to Robin Edwards, who gave it his all voicing Thomas in this. A lot of screaming and different inflections were needed here. He gave such a great performance and really got into the character. Thank you, Robin. We all love ya. Sophie Bloor is new to the team. She voiced Annie and Clarabelle, and I think she nailed it. She gave these two such a fun energy. Thank you, Sophie. Chase, or CTF-theologist as you may know him, voiced Toby, and while his role was small here, he did great too. I heard his Toby voice in an I Love Trains 323 video and was like, that's a great Toby. Thanks for taking the role, Chase. I hope to work with you again in the future. And of course, a big ol' thank you to all of the returning VAs. Tom Marshall as our narrator, who always nails it. Richard Browning as Gordon, who never misses. David Piper as Edward. Joe Mills as Oliver. And Trampy as Henry, James, and Bertie. He had a lot of fun with Bertie, let me tell ya. And of course, can't forget Isaiah, aka One Tram Band, who put his heart and soul into the score for this. There are so many good pieces here. I don't know which one is my favorite, to be honest. It might be the race, but the ending theme is up there too. Too hard to choose. The music, as always, will be uploaded in its own The Music of video soon, so you can all be able to enjoy the uncut score. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to those who helped me with writing this story. This was the first time I've written a story for one of these that was totally original, so it went through a ton of drafts. Kevin, or as you all may know him, Zio, helped me early on into writing this and proposed the ultimate moral for the story. Nemo, aka WR Duke Dog, helped me rid of a couple unimportant scenes and streamline it. And Trampy provided some feedback on character dialogue. All of your guys' efforts are so appreciated, and I think it all came together to create a great story. Whew, still got a lot to talk about this time round. Speaking of Zio, I'd like to point you all towards his new Instagram account, Sodor1993. He moved into a house recently and has dedicated his basement to creating a huge Island of Sodor model railway, complete with a Tidmouth, Knapford Junction, Wellsworth, and more. I just visited him recently and saw it all in person. It is massive. It is still early days, and this account will cover all his progress as he builds it. If you have an Instagram, go give him a follow. Next topic is Audrey Extravaganza 5. And it is with a heavy heart, I must tell you all, that I will not be attending it. I really wanted to, and I was trying to make plans to get there for it, but yeah, financially it's just not in the cards this year. I hope everyone who goes has a splendid time. And please, post lots of photos and videos. I want to see what I'm missing out on. It's going to be a crazy event, from what I've heard. And lastly, the next video. Now you've all been very patient. It will be the Misty Island Rescue / Season 14 retrospective. I'm currently working on it, and my hope is to have that out by the end of the month. I've suffered through Misty Island 3 times for this thing. 3 times! No sane human being should have to bear this thing multiple times in 1 week. And I think that's everything. Wait. We got one more thing. Could it be? Why, yes it is. As of today, May 12th, Akira Scale announced Wilbert in 00 scale. I speculated about this in my 80th predictions video. A few months ago, Akira Scale posted sample photos of their new Hunslet Austerity saddle tanks, and way at the back of the group shot was a blue one that wasn't specified. Judging by the shade of blue and the lining, I speculated that that was Wilbert, the austerity tank at the Dean Forest Railway, named in honor of Wilbert Audrey, and later turned into a character in the Railway series. Akira Scale waited till the big day to make the announcement, and they got in touch with me to help spread the word. It is due to be delivered the same time as all the others in the range, and it will be coming in a fancy box, with a letter of thanks from the Audrey family themselves. All proceeds from the sales of this model will go directly towards the cosmetic restoration of the real Wilbert, which is planned to go on display at the Dean Forest to help tell the Wilbert Audrey story. So please, support this model. It's a win-win for everyone. And hey, if this does well, it just may pave the way for more Railway Series inspired models. Akira Scale is making the real duck, after all. Who knows what else is possible? You can bet your butt that I will be pre-ordering this. Link to their announcement video is in the description below. Okay, now that's everything. Thanks for watching, everyone, and happy 80th. Have a great day, and go watch some Thomas videos. Throw on a DVD, break out the complete collection, or run some model trains. Go celebrate your love for this series however you want. I will see you all in the next one, folks. See ya!